The moment I understood betrayal, true bone-deep betrayal, wasn't when I found the photographs. It was when I saw my mother's handwriting on the manila folder. That familiar cursive I'd grown up seeing on birthday cards, on notes tucked into my lunchbox, and on the grocery list stuck to our refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. That same handwriting now spelled out words that made my legs buckle. Evidence of neglect, custody filing. My own mother. The woman who taught me how to braid hair, who held my hand during my first heartbreak, who cried at my wedding and promised she'd always be there for me. That woman had spent 6 weeks in my home, watching me struggle through the most challenging transition of my life. She'd been building a case to take my daughter away from me. I was 29 years old, 4 months postpartum, and standing in my mother's guest room with a folder full of photographs of my worst moments. Pictures of me asleep on the couch with unwashed hair. Pictures of dishes in the sink. Pictures of my daughter crying in her bassinet while I, according to the timestamp, was in the bathroom for 7 minutes. 7 minutes. I remember that day. I had mastitis. I was burning with fever and I'd gone to the bathroom to sob where no one could hear me. And my mother had walked past my crying baby, not to comfort her but to take a photograph. My name is Josephine. Most people call me Josie. And this is the story of how the person I trusted most in this world tried to destroy me when I was at my most vulnerable. And how I found the strength to fight back. Let me take you back to before. Before the folder. Before the photographs. Before I learned that love could be a weapon wielded by the very hands that once rocked you to sleep. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, in a yellow house with green shutters that my father painted every 3 years, whether they needed it or not. My mother, Claudette, was the kind of woman other mothers aspired to be. She made her own pie crust. She volunteered at church. She kept a clean house and raised 3 children, me, my brother Daniel, and my sister Renee, with what I always believed was fierce, unconditional love. My father passed when I was 19, heart attack as sudden as a summer storm. One morning he was eating eggs and reading the newspaper, and by noon he was gone. After that, Mama became the center of our family's gravity. We orbited her. We called her every Sunday. We drove home for every holiday. She was our anchor. When I met Marcus at a friend's barbecue 6 years ago, the first thing I thought was that Mama would approve of him. He was tall and soft-spoken and worked as an electrician with his own small business. He opened doors, said "ma'am," and looked me in my eyes when I talked. On our 3rd date he brought me flowers he'd grown himself. Zinnias, bright orange and pink. We got married 2 years later in Mama's backyard, under a trellis my brother built. Mama cried through the whole ceremony. She hugged Marcus and called him son. She told me, her voice thick with tears, that she'd never been prouder of me. For 4 years, Marcus and I built our life in a small brick house 20 minutes from my mother's place. We saved money. We talked about children the way you talk about dreams. Someday, eventually, when the time is right. Then the time was right. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in March. Marcus was already at work, so I sat on the bathroom floor and stared at those 2 pink lines until my legs went numb. When I called Mama, I could barely get the words out. "A baby," she breathed. "Oh, Josie. Oh, my sweet girl." She drove over that same afternoon with a bag full of things. Prenatal vitamins, ginger candies for nausea, and a tiny yellow onesie that she'd been saving just in case for years. She sat at my kitchen table, held my hands, and told me that being a mother was the greatest gift God could give a woman. "And you're going to be wonderful at it," she said. "I'll make sure of that." I remember the warmth in her voice, the certainty. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have her. The pregnancy was difficult. I had hyperemesis gravidarum, morning sickness so severe that I was hospitalized twice for dehydration. I lost 15 pounds in my first trimester. I couldn't keep down water, let alone food. There were days I lay on the bathroom floor, cheek pressed to the cold tile, praying for relief. Mama came over almost every day. She brought me popsicles and saltines. She rubbed my back while I vomited. She cleaned my kitchen and did my laundry and told me stories about her own pregnancies, how she'd been sick with me too and how it was worth it. How I just had to hold on. "The strong ones always struggle," she said. "It means your body is working hard. It means you're growing something powerful." I believed her. I clung to her words like a lifeline. By my 3rd trimester, the sickness had mostly passed, but I was exhausted in a way I'd never experienced. Marcus worked long hours to save up for my maternity leave. My job as a paralegal had good benefits but average pay, and we'd agreed I'd take 3 months off after the baby came. Every dollar mattered. Mama started talking about after the baby arrived. She mentioned casually at first that she could stay with us. Help out for just a few weeks. New mothers need support, she said. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Marcus was hesitant. He's a private man, and the idea of his mother-in-law living in our small house made him uncomfortable. But I convinced him. I told him how much Mama had helped during the pregnancy. How much I needed her. How lucky we were that she was willing to give us so much of her time. It'll just be for a little while, I promised. Until I find my feet. He kissed my forehead and said, okay. He trusted me. He trusted her. Our daughter was born on a rainy night in November. Charlotte May, named for my grandmother and Marcus's mother. 8 pounds 2 ounces with a full head of dark hair and the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen. When the nurse placed her on my chest, I understood for the first time what people meant when they talked about love at first sight. It wasn't like falling. It was like being rebuilt cell by cell into someone new. Someone who would do anything, to protect this small, perfect creature. Mama was in the waiting room when Marcus wheeled me out with Charlotte in my arms. She cried. She took photographs. She held my daughter with such tenderness that I thought my heart might burst. Hi grandbaby, she whispered. My sweet, sweet grandbaby. 3 days later she moved into our guest room. And that's when everything began to change. The first 2 weeks were a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleep that came in fragments no longer than 90 minutes. Charlotte was a hungry baby, she wanted to nurse constantly and my milk was slow to come in. I remember sitting in the rocking chair at 3 in the morning, tears streaming down my face, my daughter screaming at my breast, and feeling like the biggest failure in the world. Mama appeared in the doorway in her bathrobe, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. Give her to me, she said softly. I warmed a bottle. Just this once to give you a break. I hesitated. Everything I'd read said to avoid bottles in the early weeks, that it could cause nipple confusion, and that I needed to power through to establish my supply. But Charlotte was crying so hard her face had turned purple, and I was so tired I could barely see straight. It's okay, baby, Mama said, already lifting Charlotte from my arms. Grandma's here. Grandma's got you. I watched her settle into the chair across from me and watched my daughter latch onto the bottle and begin to drink with desperate gulps. The silence that followed was so relieving that I started crying again. Go to bed, Mama said. I'll bring her to you when she needs to nurse again. I should have felt grateful. And part of me did. But there was something else, too. A slight, sharp feeling in my chest that I couldn't name. Like I'd failed some test I hadn't known I was taking. I pushed it down. I told myself I was being hormonal. Oversensitive. Mama was helping. So Marcus went back to work after the first week. He didn't want to, I could see it in his face every morning as he kissed Charlotte's forehead and then mine. But we needed the money. His business had picked up and he had jobs scheduled that he couldn't postpone. Your mama's here, he said, almost like he was trying to convince himself. You won't be alone. I know, I said. We'll be fine. But something had shifted. With Marcus gone 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, Mama became my primary companion. She was always there. In the kitchen when I stumbled downstairs, in the nursery when I went to check on Charlotte, and in the living room when I tried to rest on the couch. At first her presence felt like a safety net. Then gradually it started to feel like something else. She had opinions about everything. The way I swaddled Charlotte, too loose she'd startle herself awake. The temperature I kept the house, too warm. Babies shouldn't be overheated. The brand of diapers I'd chosen. She'd seen a news report about chemicals, didn't I know? The pediatrician I'd selected, she'd heard things. Maybe I should get a second opinion. I'm just trying to help, she'd say whenever I pushed back. I raised 3 children, Josie. I know what I'm talking about. And the thing is, she did know things. She knew how to calm Charlotte when I couldn't. She knew which hold worked for gas and which position helped with reflux. She knew the old remedies, gripe water, warm baths, and white noise from a box fan. There were moments I was genuinely grateful for her knowledge, moments I thought, thank God she's here. But there were other moments. Small things. Things I noticed but didn't examine too closely. The way she'd take Charlotte from my arms without asking, as if it were her right. The way she'd correct my technique in front of Marcus made me feel incompetent in my own home. The way she started referring to Charlotte as my baby needs her nap, my baby doesn't like that outfit, my baby was fussy today. My baby. I told myself it was just how grandmothers talked, possessive language, harmless affection. I told myself I was being petty, that I should be grateful, that so many women would kill to have this kind of support. But the feeling in my chest, that small sharp thing, kept growing. It was the third week when I noticed her phone. Mama had always been technologically challenged. She still had a flip phone when I was in high school, and she'd only upgraded to a smartphone a few years ago because Renee had insisted. She mostly used it for calls and the occasional blurry photograph. But now she was on it constantly. I'd walk into the room and find her typing something, her brow furrowed in concentration. She'd angle the screen away when I got close or slide the phone into her pocket with a casual smile. Just texting Renee, she'd say. Or, your aunt wanted an update on the baby. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. She had no reason to lie. But one afternoon I came downstairs after a nap to find her standing in the kitchen, photographing the sink, which was full of dishes, bottles I hadn't washed, a pot from the night before, and coffee mugs stained brown. Normal postpartum chaos. The kind of mess that accumulates when you're sleeping 3 hours a night and barely remembering to eat. Mama? What are you doing? She turned, and for just a moment, a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Then she smiled. I was going to send your sister a picture, she said. Show her how I've been helping out. You know how Renee worries. She laughed, but it sounded strange. Hollow. Why would Renee want a picture of dirty dishes? Oh, you know her. Mama waved her hand dismissively. She's nosy. Wants to see everything. I told her how tired you've been, and she wanted to see what I'm dealing with over here. What she was dealing with. That phrase landed in my chest like a stone. I opened my mouth to say something, I don't know what, but Charlotte started crying upstairs and the moment passed. I went to my daughter, and when I came back down 20 minutes later, the dishes were done, and Mama was on the couch, reading a magazine like nothing had happened. I didn't mention it to Marcus. It seemed too small, too strange, and too complicated to explain. My mother took a picture of our messy kitchen and I feel weird about it. How could I say that without sounding paranoid? Ungrateful? So I said nothing. I swallowed the stone and carried on. But I started watching her more closely. The next few weeks unfolded in a haze of exhaustion and quiet observation. I noticed that Mama always had her phone nearby now. She'd photograph things and pretend she hadn't. The overflowing laundry basket, the pile of mail I hadn't sorted, the dust on the bookshelf. Once, I caught her taking a picture of me through the doorway while I nursed Charlotte. I was wearing a stained t-shirt and no bra, and my hair had been unwashed for 4 days. I looked like every new mother looks. Like a woman surviving. Mama, did you just take a picture of me? What? No. She laughed. I was checking my messages. Don't be silly. But I'd seen the flash. I'd heard the shutter sound. I started to feel watched in my own home. Every time I left a mess, every time I lost my patience, every time I sat on the couch too long or forgot to eat breakfast, I'd feel her eyes on me. Assessing. Recording. I told myself I was losing my mind. That sleep deprivation was making me paranoid that my mother, would never do anything to hurt me. But then there was the conversation I overheard. It was late, almost midnight. Charlotte had finally fallen asleep, and I was shuffling to the bathroom when I heard Mama's voice through her closed bedroom door. She was on the phone with someone. I'm documenting everything, she said. I have photographs. Timestamps. You told me to be thorough. Pause. She was listening to whoever was on the other end. No, she doesn't suspect. She's too tired to notice anything. And the husband is never here. He's useless. Another pause. I know what I'm doing. By the time this is over, there won't be any question about who should be raising this child. My hand found the wall to steady myself. My legs had gone liquid, boneless. I stood there in the dark hallway, listening to my mother discuss me as if I were a problem to be solved. And something inside me cracked. Not broken. Not yet. But cracked. I went back to my bedroom on numb legs. I climbed into bed beside Marcus, who was snoring softly, and I stared at the ceiling until dawn. Documenting everything. Photographs. Who should be raising this child? What was happening? What was my mother doing? I spent the next 3 days trying to convince myself I'd misheard, that I'd dreamed it. That my exhausted mind had twisted something innocent into something sinister. Mama continued to smile at me, to help with Charlotte, to cook dinner, to fold laundry, and to act like everything was normal. And I let her. Because the alternative, that my mother was plotting something terrible, was too painful to accept. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. Couldn't unhear what I'd heard. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. The way Mama would ask me questions that seemed innocent but felt pointed. When was the last time you showered, honey? Have you been feeling overwhelmed? Do you ever think you might need help? The way she'd document my answers, nodding thoughtfully, sometimes typing something into her phone afterward. The way she'd make comments about Marcus, how he was never around, how I was basically a single mother, how hard it must be to do this alone. You're not alone, I said once defensively. Marcus works hard. He provides for us. Of course he does, Mama said smoothly. I just worry about you, that's all. You seem so tired. So fragile. Fragile. The word clung to me like a wet sheet. I wasn't fragile. I was a new mother. There's a difference. But in that moment, standing in my kitchen with my mother's concerned gaze on me, I couldn't articulate why. I could only feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on my shoulders. It was a Tuesday when I decided to look at her phone. She was in the shower. Charlotte was napping. Marcus was at work. The house was quiet except for the sound of water running through pipes. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. I'm not proud of what I did. I was raised to respect privacy, to trust family, and to believe that good people don't snoop. But I wasn't the same person I'd been 2 months ago. That woman, trusting, grateful, naive, had died somewhere in those midnight hours, listening to her mother talk about her like she was a case to be managed. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. Her text messages were the first thing I checked. There were conversations with Renee, with Daniel, and with friends from church. All normal. But then I saw a name I didn't recognize. Harold Dawson, attorney at law. My stomach dropped. I opened the thread. The messages went back 6 weeks. 6 weeks. That meant she'd contacted this lawyer before Charlotte was even born. Before she'd moved into my home. Before she'd held my hand through labor and told me how proud she was of me. I scrolled with trembling fingers, my vision blurring with each new message. Daughter shows signs of severe postpartum depression. Erratic behavior. Neglecting basic hygiene and household responsibilities. Husband absent most of the day. Child left primarily in my care. I have concerns about the infant's safety. Attached. Photographs documenting unsafe living conditions. Note the clutter, unwashed bottles, and general state of disarray. Daughter became agitated when I offered parenting advice. Possible sign of instability. She seems unable to accept help or criticism. I couldn't breathe. The kitchen tilted around me and I had to grip the counter to keep from falling. My mother's words, typed so calmly, so clinically, painted a picture of someone I didn't recognize. A neglectful mother. An unstable woman. A danger to her own child. But it wasn't me. None of it was me. I kept scrolling. I believe I have sufficient evidence to file for emergency custody. The child would be safer in my care while my daughter receives the help she clearly needs. And then from the attorney, based on what you've provided, you have a reasonable case. Grandparent custody is difficult but not impossible, especially if you can demonstrate parental unfitness. Continue documenting. We'll file when you're ready. My mother's response, I'll be ready by the end of the month. I just need a few more incidents on record. A few more incidents. She was manufacturing evidence. Creating a narrative. Turning my exhaustion, my vulnerability, and my trust into weapons she could use against me in a courtroom. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. Moving on instinct, I navigated to her photo gallery. What I found there made me physically sick. Hundreds of photographs. Hundreds. Me, asleep on the couch with Charlotte in the bassinet nearby. Captioned, Mother unconscious while infant cries. The kitchen sink is full of dishes. Captioned, Unsanitary conditions. My unmade bed. Captioned, Evidence of depression/self-neglect. Charlotte in a diaper that needed changing. Captioned, Child left in soiled diaper for extended period. I remembered that moment. I'd been in the bathroom for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Me crying while trying to nurse. Captioned, "Mother emotionally unstable, unable to cope with basic parenting tasks." She had documented everything. Every hard moment, every ugly moment, every human moment that comes with new motherhood, she had captured and twisted into evidence of my unfitness. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. My body moved before my mind caught up. I placed the phone back on the counter exactly where I'd found it. I walked to the refrigerator and opened it, staring at nothing, trying to slow my racing heart. "Josie? You okay, honey?" Her voice. That familiar voice. The voice that had sung me lullabies, that had comforted me through nightmares, that had told me she loved me more times than I could count. I turned around and looked at my mother. She was wearing her bathrobe, her wet hair wrapped in a towel. She looked concerned. She looked like a loving grandmother who just wanted to help. She looked like a stranger. "I'm fine," I heard myself say. "Just tired." She smiled. "Why don't you go rest? I'll listen for Charlotte." I nodded and walked past her, up the stairs and into my bedroom. I closed the door, locked it, and sat on the edge of my bed with my hands pressed over my mouth. I didn't cry. I was beyond crying. I was in some frozen place where tears couldn't reach, where sound couldn't penetrate. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to reconcile the woman downstairs with the mother I thought I knew. How could she do this? I thought about our relationship, searching for signs I might have missed. She'd always been particular. Opinionated. She'd always had strong ideas about how things should be done, and she hadn't been shy about sharing them. But I'd interpreted that as love, as care, as a mother wanting the best for her children. Now I saw it differently. Control. It had always been about control. When I'd chosen a college she disapproved of, she'd barely spoken to me for months. When I'd dated a boy she didn't like in high school, she'd made my life miserable until I broke up with him. When I decided to marry Marcus after only 2 years of dating, she'd questioned my judgment for weeks before finally accepting him. She didn't love me. She loved the version of me that did what she wanted. And now that I had something she wanted, Charlotte, she was willing to destroy me to get it. Marcus came home at 7 that evening. I'd spent the afternoon in a daze, going through the motions of feeding Charlotte, changing her and rocking her to sleep. All while my mother moved around me, oblivious to what I now knew. Or not oblivious. Just perhaps confident that I was too weak, too tired, too fragile to figure it out. I waited until after dinner. Until my mother had retreated to her room to watch her shows. Until Charlotte was down for her first stretch of sleep. Then I sat Marcus down at the kitchen table and told him everything. He didn't believe me at first. I could see it in his face. The confusion, the disbelief, the desperate hope that I was mistaken. "Josie, that doesn't make any sense. Why would your mother?" "I saw the messages, Marcus. I saw the photographs. She's been documenting everything. She's building a custody case. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe it was for something else. She called you useless." My voice cracked. "She said you're never here. She said I'm unstable and neglectful and that Charlotte would be better off with her. She's been planning this for weeks. Before the baby was even born." Marcus went very still. I watched the realization move across his face like a shadow, watched the confusion give way to something more complex. Something I'd never seen in my gentle, soft-spoken husband. "Show me," he said. "I can't. The phone's in her room. But Marcus, I swear to you. I believe you." He reached across the table and took my hands. His grip was firm, steady. "I believe you, Josie. I need to see it. I need to understand what we're dealing with." We waited until after midnight. Until the house was silent and my mother's light had been off for hours. Then Marcus crept down the hall to her room while I stood watch, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she'd hear it. He was gone for 12 minutes. When he came back his face was pale and his jaw was tight. "I took screenshots," he said quietly. "Sent them to my phone and deleted the evidence I was there. She won't know." "What did you see?" "Everything you described. And more." He swallowed hard. "There's a folder on her phone, Josie. A folder labeled custody evidence. She's been keeping notes. Detailed notes. Dates, times, descriptions of your behavior. She's been tracking how often you cry. How often you forget to eat. How long you sleep." I closed my eyes. "She's been studying me. Like I'm a subject in an experiment. She's been building a case." Marcus's voice was rough. A case to take our daughter. We stood there in the dark hallway holding each other, the weight of betrayal pressing down on us like a physical thing. I thought about my mother sleeping peacefully in the next room. I thought about all the times she'd smiled at me over the past weeks, all the times she'd called me honey, and sweetheart, and my sweet girl. All of it lies, all of its performance. What do we do? I whispered. Marcus pulled back and looked at me. In his eyes I saw fear. But I also noticed something else. A determination that matched the fire beginning to kindle in my own chest. We fight, he said. We get our own lawyer. We document everything she's done. And we get her out of our house. If we confront her now, she'll know we know. She might file faster. She might. Then we don't confront her yet. Marcus's jaw tightened. We play along. We gather evidence. And when we're ready, we strike first. I nodded slowly. It felt wrong. Deceptive, manipulative, everything I'd been taught not to be. But my mother had drawn the battle lines. She'd made me an enemy in my own home. If I wanted to protect my daughter, I had to fight with the same weapons she'd chosen. Hey, I said. Hey. We do this together. Marcus kissed my forehead. Together. The next 3 days were the hardest of my life. I had to look at my mother every morning and smile. I had to accept her help with Charlotte, knowing that every moment of struggle was being logged and catalogued. I had to pretend that nothing had changed, that I was still the exhausted, trusting daughter she thought I was. Meanwhile, Marcus and I moved in secret. He contacted a family law attorney, a woman named Patricia Holbrook, who was highly recommended and, unlike Harold Dawson, specialized in defending parents against frivolous custody claims. We met with her on Thursday afternoon while my mother thought I was at a doctor's appointment. Patricia was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She listened as I explained the situation, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. "This is more common than you'd think," she said when I finished. "Grandparents who believe they know better. Who convince themselves they're saving the child. It's a form of narcissism, really, the inability to see their adult children as capable, autonomous people. Can she actually take Charlotte?" My voice trembled. "Can she win?" Patricia leaned forward. "Grandparent custody cases are difficult to win, but they're not impossible. Especially if the grandparent can demonstrate parental unfitness. What your mother has been doing is building a narrative. Photographs of messes, notes about your emotional state, documentation of your husband's work hours. Individually, none of it means much. But taken together, presented by a skilled attorney to a sympathetic judge, it could paint a concerning picture. So she could win. She could try. But here's the thing, Josie, you're not unfit. You're a new mother. Everything you've described is completely normal. The exhaustion, the emotions, the messy house, the occasional overwhelm. That's not neglect. That's parenthood." Patricia smiled grimly. "What your mother has done, however, is deeply problematic. Deceiving you to gain access to your home. Manufacturing evidence. Colluding with an attorney to file what I would argue is a bad faith custody claim. We can use all of that against her." "How?" "First, we get her out of your house. Legally and cleanly. Then we file a preemptive motion. Essentially, we go to the court first and explain what's been happening. We present the screenshots your husband took, the text messages with her attorney, the fact that she moved into your home under false pretenses. We paint the accurate picture. A grandmother who overstepped, who manipulated, who tried to exploit her daughter's vulnerable postpartum period for her own gain." Marcus leaned forward. And then we request a protective order. Something that limits her contact with Charlotte. Something that makes it clear to the court that she is the danger here, not you." I felt something shift in my chest. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The possibility that I could fight this. That I could win. "When do we start?" I asked. Patricia smiled. "We already have." The plan was simple but required precision. Patricia advised us to continue the charade for one more week while she prepared our filings. We needed to gather additional evidence, not manufactured like my mother's but real. Documentation of her deception. Proof that I was, in fact, a competent mother being undermined by someone who should have been supporting me. "Start keeping a journal," Patricia instructed. "Write down everything. Every comment she makes, every photograph you catch her taking, every conversation that feels manipulative. Date and time everything. This is your counter-narrative. So I began to write. I wrote about the morning she criticized how I held Charlotte during feeding, then immediately typed something into her phone. I wrote about the afternoon she accidentally left the back door open and then remarked loudly about how dangerous it was that I hadn't noticed. I wrote about the evening she asked with false concern whether I'd considered talking to someone about my mood swings. I wrote about the way she looked at my daughter, not with the warm affection of a grandmother, but with something hungrier, something possessive. I wrote about how she'd started calling herself Mama Claudette to Charlotte, as if to establish her own parental claim. I wrote and I watched and I waited. Meanwhile, I began to take care of myself with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed. I showered every day even when I was exhausted. I cleaned the kitchen after every meal even when I wanted to collapse. I put on real clothes instead of stained pajamas. I brushed my hair. I ate 3 meals a day. Not because my mother's criticisms were valid, but because I refused to give her any more ammunition. Marcus started coming home earlier. He rearranged his work schedule, delegating jobs to his crew so he could be present. Every evening he made a point of being visibly involved. Feeding Charlotte, changing her, walking her around the living room when she was fussy. We were building our own evidence. Evidence of a functional, loving family. Evidence of 2 parents working together. My mother noticed the changes. I could see the frustration flickering behind her eyes, the way her lips pressed thin when she found the kitchen spotless or saw Marcus cradling Charlotte in his arms. "You seem better," she said one afternoon, and it sounded almost like an accusation. "I am better," I replied evenly. "I think I was just adjusting. New mother stuff, you know." She studied me for a long moment and I held her gaze without flinching. Something had shifted in me since I'd learned the truth. The exhaustion was still there, the hormonal waves still crashing through me at odd moments. But underneath it all was a core of steel I hadn't known I possessed. My mother had underestimated me. She'd seen my vulnerability and mistaken it for weakness. She'd forgotten, or maybe never understood, that the same love that made me soft also made me dangerous. I would do anything to protect my daughter. Anything. On the 5th day of our secret campaign, my mother made a mistake. She'd grown bolder, perhaps sensing that time was running out. That afternoon, while I was upstairs pumping milk, she did something I'd never expected. She took Charlotte outside. Without asking. Without telling me. I came downstairs to an empty bassinet and an empty house. For 3 terrible seconds I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My mind went to the darkest places. Kidnapping, accidents, disappearance. Then I saw them through the kitchen window. My mother was in the backyard holding Charlotte, talking to someone on her phone. She was pacing back and forth, gesturing with one hand, my daughter tucked against her shoulder as she belonged there. I didn't go outside. Instead, I grabbed my own phone and recorded through the window. 2 minutes of footage. My mother, holding my child without permission, engaged in a clearly meaningful conversation. Later, when I reviewed the footage with the volume amplified, I could make out fragments of what she was saying. "Almost ready. Just need a few more days. Yes, I have everything. She won't see it coming. She won't see it coming." I saved the video to 3 different places. Cloud storage. My email. Marcus's phone. Then I texted Patricia with an update. She took Charlotte outside without permission. I have a video. She was on the phone talking about the case. Patricia's response came within minutes. "Perfect. This is precisely what we need. I'm filing tomorrow morning. Be ready." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Marcus, listening to his steady breathing, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow the carefully constructed facade would crumble and my mother would know that I knew. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening. Couldn't reconcile the woman planning to steal my child with the woman who had raised me. I kept searching my memories for warning signs, for moments that should have told me who she really was. And the more I searched, the more I found. The way she'd always needed to be right. The way she'd dismissed my feelings when they didn't align with hers. The way she'd controlled my siblings and me through guilt and manipulation, always framing her control as love. The way she'd slowly isolated my father from his own family before he died, convincing him that her way was the only way. My father. God, I missed him. He'd been the buffer between my mother's intensity and the rest of the world. When he died, there was nothing to soften her edges anymore. Nothing to remind her that other people had valid perspectives, valid needs. Had she always been like this? Had I just been too close to see it? Or had losing my father broken something in her? Had grief twisted her love into something possessive and dark? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. But lying there in the darkness, I made a decision. I would fight her with everything I had. But I wouldn't become her. I wouldn't let this betrayal turn me bitter, wouldn't allow it to poison the mother I was becoming. I would protect my daughter, but I would also teach her. Someday when she was old enough to understand, that love shouldn't hurt like this. That family shouldn't be a battlefield. I would be different. Better. The chain of dysfunction would end with me. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Patricia filed our motion at 9 a.m. By 9:45, my mother's attorney had been notified. By 10:30, Patricia called to confirm that a hearing had been scheduled for the following week. "It's done," she said. "Now comes the hard part." The hard part. Right. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went downstairs to face my mother. She was in the kitchen as usual making coffee. Charlotte was in the swing nearby, batting at the little mobile that hung above her head. A normal morning. An ordinary scene. Except nothing about it was normal anymore. "Morning, honey." My mother smiled at me. "Coffee's almost ready. We need to talk." Something flickered in her eyes. A flash of wariness, quickly suppressed. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. "I know what you've been doing, Mama." She tilted her head, the picture of innocent confusion. "What I've been doing? Honey, I've been helping you. Taking care of Charlotte while you rest. Cooking, cleaning. I know about the photographs. I know about Harold Dawson. I know about the custody case." The words hung in the air between us. I watched my mother's face transform, the mask of concern crumbling, something more complex and colder emerging beneath. "Josie." Her voice was different now. "Harper. I don't know what you think you know, but..." I read the messages. I saw the photo folder. "I heard you on the phone, Mama, talking about how I wouldn't see it coming." I leaned forward. "You moved into my home to spy on me, to build a case against me, to take my daughter." For a long moment she said nothing. The coffee maker gurgled behind her. Charlotte cooed in her swing, oblivious to the war being waged above her head. Then my mother straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "Everything I've done," she said, "I've done for that baby. You've done it for yourself. You don't understand, Josie. You're not well. You're not coping. I've watched you struggle for weeks, and I've seen how this child is suffering because you're not capable." "I'm not capable?" I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "I'm her mother. I carried her for 9 months. I gave birth to her. I have fed her from my own body every 2 hours for the past 6 weeks. And you took photographs of me at my lowest moments and tried to use them to prove I don't deserve her. Because you don't." The words came out flat, final. "You're just like your father, Josie. Weak. Emotional. Unable to handle pressure. That child needs stability. Structure. She needs someone who knows what they're doing. She needs her mother. She needs me." The venom in her voice shocked me even though I'd known what she was. Hearing it spoken so plainly, so unapologetically, it was like being slapped. "You need to leave," I said. "No. Today." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Or what? You'll call the police?" "I'm her grandmother, Josie. I have rights. You have nothing." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. Patricia's email confirming our filing. "We've already gone to court. We filed this morning. Your attorney has been notified. And everything you've done, the deception, the manufactured evidence, the violation of our trust, it's all documented. Our attorney says you've actually helped our case. No judge is going to grant custody to a grandmother who manipulated her way into the home to spy on a vulnerable new mother." The color drained from her face. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "You're going to regret this. The only mistake I made was trusting you." I walked to the swing and lifted Charlotte into my arms. My daughter nuzzled against my chest, warm and solid and mine. "Marcus will be home in an hour," I said, turning back to face my mother. "Your things need to be gone by then. If they're not, I'm calling the police and reporting you for trespassing. You can't do this. I'm your mother." You stopped being my mother the moment you decided to become my enemy. I walked out of the kitchen with Charlotte in my arms. Behind me, I heard my mother start to cry, great heaving sobs that might have broken my heart a week ago. Now they just sounded like defeat. She was gone by the time Marcus came home. Her room was empty, stripped of all her belongings. The sheets were still on the bed, still smelling faintly of her perfume, that familiar scent of roses and powder that I'd associated with comfort my whole life. Marcus found me standing in the doorway staring at the space. "You okay?" he asked softly. "No." I leaned into him, letting his arms wrap around me. "But I will be." Charlotte stirred between us, making the soft snuffling sounds she always made before waking. "My daughter. My responsibility. My greatest love." "It's over," Marcus said. But I knew better. The confrontation was over. The real battle was beginning. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. 7 days. 7 days to prepare for the most important fight of my life. 7 days to gather my strength, organize my evidence, and steel myself to face my mother across a courtroom. Patricia was cautiously optimistic. "The fact that she left voluntarily helps," she explained during our preparation meeting. "It suggests she knows her position is weak. But don't underestimate her, Josie. People like your mother, they don't give up easily. She'll come to that hearing with everything she has." "What should I expect?" "Her attorney will try to paint a picture of you as unstable. They'll present those photographs, those notes she kept. They'll argue that her documentation proves her concerns were valid, that she was a worried grandmother trying to protect her grandchild from an unfit mother. And how do we counter that?" Patricia smiled grimly. "We tell the truth. We show the judge what really happened. A grandmother who moved into her daughter's home under false pretenses, who manufactured evidence during the most vulnerable period of a new mother's life, who colluded with an attorney to file a bad faith custody claim. We present your documentation, your husband's testimony, your pediatrician's records showing Charlotte is healthy and thriving. We paint the accurate picture. Will it be enough?" "It should be. But Josie," Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious, "I need you to be prepared for something. These hearings can get ugly. Your mother may say things about you, personal things, hurtful things. She may bring up your past, your struggles, anything she can use. You need to stay calm. Stay focused. Don't let her bait you into an emotional reaction. That's exactly what she wants." I nodded slowly. "I understand. But understanding something intellectually and living it emotionally are two different things. I spent that week in a state of constant anxiety, my stomach churning every time I thought about what was coming. I barely slept. I barely ate. I held Charlotte for hours at a time, breathing in her scent, memorizing the weight of her in my arms. Marcus was my rock. Every evening he sat with me and reviewed our case. Every night he held me while I cried. Every morning he reminded me that we would win. That our family would survive this. "She's not going to take Charlotte," he said firmly. "She's not going to take you from me. We're going to walk into that courtroom together and we're going to walk out together. As a family." I wanted to believe him. I tried to believe him. But late at night, alone with my thoughts, the fear crept in. What if the judge believed her? What if the photographs were more damaging than Patricia thought? What if my mother's tears and concerned grandmother act were more convincing than my exhausted, hollow-eyed truth? What if I lost my daughter? The news spread through my family like wildfire. My sister Renee called first, her voice tight with shock. "Josie, Mama just called me. She said you kicked her out of your house. She said you're trying to keep her from seeing Charlotte. What the hell is going on?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. Then finally, she did what? "She's been documenting me for weeks, Renee. Photographs. Notes. She was building a custody case." That's insane. Mama wouldn't." Renee stopped herself. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the memories rearranging themselves into a new pattern. "Actually, you know what? Maybe she would." "What do you mean?" "Do you remember when I got divorced? When Mama came to help me with the kids?" "Of course. She did the same thing, Josie. Not as extreme, but she kept telling me I wasn't coping, that I was falling apart. She'd make these little comments about how the kids would be better off staying with her for a while. I thought she was just being overprotective, but now, Now I'm wondering if she was testing the waters, seeing if I'd give in, if I'd let her take over. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell me? Because it sounds crazy. Because she's our mother. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. Renee's voice cracked. God, Josie, I'm so sorry. If I'd said something, maybe you would have. It's not your fault. I meant it. How could Renee have known? How could any of us have known? Our mother had spent our whole lives teaching us that her love was unconditional, her concern was selfless, and her judgment was sound. We'd been trained since childhood to trust her, to defer to her, to believe that she always knew best. That's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't feel like manipulation when it's happening. It just feels like love. What can I do? Renee asked. How can I help? Just believe me. Support me. Don't let her turn you against me. Never. Her voice was fierce now, confident. I'm on your side, Josie. I've always been on your side. My brother Daniel was harder to convince. He'd always been Mama's favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. When I called to explain what was happening, his first instinct was to defend her. There must be some misunderstanding, he said. Mama loves you. She loves Charlotte. She wouldn't. I have the text messages, Daniel. I have her conversations with her attorney. This isn't a misunderstanding. A long pause. Can you send them to me? The screenshots. I did. 10 minutes later he called back. I don't know what to say. His voice was different now, smaller, sadder. I always knew Mama was controlling. I just never thought she'd. Neither did I. I'm sorry, Josie. I'm so sorry you're going through this. It wasn't much, but it was enough. My siblings believed me. My family, what remained of it, was intact. But I knew the most challenging part was still to come. Thursday arrived cold and gray, the sky heavy with unfallen rain. Marcus and I dropped Charlotte off with Renee, who'd driven down the night before to help. Leaving my daughter, even for a few hours, felt like tearing off a piece of my own body. I stood in Renee's doorway for too long, holding Charlotte against my chest, breathing her in. She's going to be fine, Renee said gently. Go fight for her. I've got this. I nodded, kissed Charlotte's forehead one last time and walked to the car. The courthouse was a squat brick building downtown, unremarkable except for what happened inside its walls. Families are being torn apart. Lives are being decided. Strangers are writing futures in black robes. Patricia met us in the lobby, her briefcase heavy with documentation. How are you feeling? Terrified. Good. Use it. Channel it into focus. She handed me a bottle of water. Remember what we discussed. Stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't volunteer information. And whatever she says about you, whatever lies she tells, don't react. Let me handle the pushback. I understand. One more thing. Patricia's eyes met mine and I saw something there. Not just professional concern but genuine compassion. What you're doing today takes courage. Most people never stand up to their abusers, especially when that abuser is a parent. I want you to know that whatever happens in that courtroom, you've already won the most important battle. You've broken the cycle. You've chosen your daughter over your mother's approval. That takes a strength most people don't have. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. We walked into the courtroom together. My mother was already there. She sat at the opposite table with her attorney. A thin, gray-haired man who looked exactly like someone who would help a grandmother steal a baby. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was flawless. She wore a soft pink cardigan that made her look gentle, harmless, grandmotherly. When she saw me, her expression shifted into something I recognized. Wounded concern. The mask of a loving mother who just wanted what was best for her family. But I knew what was underneath. I'd seen it. I didn't look at her again. The judge entered. The Honorable Margaret Chin, a small woman with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair. Patricia had told me she was known for being fair but thorough and that she didn't tolerate games or manipulation. I prayed that was true. We're here today regarding a custody petition filed by Claudette Monroe regarding her granddaughter, Charlotte Marie Williams, Judge Chin began. I've reviewed the initial filings from both parties. This appears to be a case of a grandparent custody claim versus parental objection. She looked at my mother's attorney. Mr. Dawson, please present your client's case. Harold Dawson stood, smoothing his tie. Your Honor, my client is a concerned grandmother who witnessed troubling signs of parental neglect and emotional instability during her time in her daughter's home. She documented these concerns, not out of malice, but out of genuine fear for her granddaughter's safety. We have photographic evidence showing unsanitary living conditions, a mother who frequently appeared unable to cope with basic parenting responsibilities, and documentation of the father's extended absences from the home. Mrs. Monroe believes that Charlotte would be better served by a more stable environment, namely her own. He presented the photographs. One by one they appeared on the courtroom monitor. My messy kitchen, my unmade bed, my exhausted face, captured in moments I'd thought were private. It was surreal seeing my worst moments displayed for strangers to judge. I felt Marcus's hand find mine under the table and squeeze. Stay calm. Stay focused. Mrs. Monroe has been a devoted grandmother since Charlotte's birth, Dawson continued. She moved into her daughter's home specifically to help during the postpartum period. What she witnessed there alarmed her enough to seek legal counsel. She is not trying to punish her daughter. She is trying to protect her granddaughter. Judge Chin nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Ms. Holbrook, your response. Patricia stood. Your Honor, what Mr. Dawson describes as documentation of concern is actually something far more troubling. A premeditated campaign to manufacture evidence against a vulnerable new mother. My client, Josephine Williams, is not neglectful or unstable. She is a woman who gave birth less than 2 months ago and was recovering from a difficult pregnancy while learning to care for her first child. The conditions Mrs. Monroe photographed, unwashed dishes, an unmade bed, a tired mother, are not evidence of neglect. They are evidence of normal postpartum life. She pulled up our counter-evidence on the monitor. What is evidence of wrongdoing, however, is this. Text messages between Mrs. Monroe and Mr. Dawson dating back to before Charlotte's birth. In these messages, Mrs. Monroe outlines her plan to move into her daughter's home and document concerns. She discusses strategy with her attorney. She refers to manufacturing incidents and describes how her daughter won't see it coming. A murmur rippled through the small courtroom. Judge Chen's eyes narrowed. Furthermore, Patricia continued, we have video evidence of Mrs. Monroe removing Charlotte from the home without parental permission and discussing the custody case on the phone. We have testimony from Mrs. Williams's sister confirming a pattern of controlling behavior. And we have records from Charlotte's pediatrician showing that this child is healthy, thriving, and meeting every developmental milestone. Hardly the profile of a neglected infant. She turned to face my mother directly. Mrs. Monroe did not move into her daughter's home to help. She moved in to spy, to manipulate, to build a case that would allow her to take custody of a child that is not hers. This is not grandparental concern. This is grandparental overreach of the most egregious kind. Judge Chin held up a hand. I've heard enough opening statements. I'd like to hear directly from the parties involved. She looked at me. Mrs. Williams, please take the stand. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the witness chair. It was time to tell my story. I don't remember every word I said on that witness stand. The fear was too great, the adrenaline too overwhelming. But I remember the feeling of it, the way my voice shook at first, then steadied. The way I looked at Judge Chin and told her the truth. Not a curated version, not a defensive explanation, but the raw, honest reality of what I'd experienced. I told her about my pregnancy, the hyperemesis, the hospitalizations, the bone-deep exhaustion that had followed me into motherhood like a shadow I couldn't shake. I told her about my mother's offer to help. How grateful I'd been. How I'd trusted her completely without question, because she was my mother and I'd never imagined she could hurt me. I told her about the slow accumulation of unease. The photographs I'd caught her taking. The conversations I'd overheard. The dawning, devastating realization that the woman I'd loved my whole life was building a weapon out of my vulnerability. She watched me struggle, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay composed. She watched me cry. She watched me doubt myself. And instead of helping me, instead of telling me I was doing okay, that every new mother feels this way, she took pictures. She kept notes. She sent them to an attorney so she could prove I wasn't good enough. Judge Chin listened without expression. When I finished, she nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Dawson, your witness. The cross-examination was brutal. Dawson walked me through every photograph, every documented moment, asking me to explain myself like a defendant on trial for a crime I hadn't committed. Why were the dishes in the sink? Why was the laundry piled on the couch? Why was I asleep when my daughter was crying? I answered as calmly as I could. The dishes were there because I'd been nursing for an hour and hadn't had time to clean. The laundry was piled up because my mother had offered to fold it but hadn't. I was asleep. I'd been awake for 22 hours straight because my daughter had colic, and because I was so exhausted I could barely see straight. So you admit, Dawson said, his tone sharpening, that you were frequently too tired to attend to basic household responsibilities? I admit that I was a new mother. That I was learning. That some days were harder than others. I met his eyes steadily. But I never neglected my daughter. I never harmed her. I was doing my best, and my mother took advantage of that. Your mother was concerned. My mother was planning this before Charlotte was even born. My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. She contacted you, contacted your firm before I even went into labor. She moved into my home not to help me but to gather ammunition against me. That's not a concern, Mr. Dawson. That's predation. The courtroom went silent. Dawson's mouth opened then closed. He glanced at my mother, whose composure had finally cracked. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. No further questions, he muttered, returning to his seat. Then it was my mother's turn to testify. She walked to the stand slowly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The picture of a heartbroken grandmother. A mother who only wanted to protect her family. I watched her settle into the chair, watched her arrange her features into an expression of wounded dignity, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not hatred. Something quieter. Sadder. Pity. She was performing. Even now, even here, she couldn't stop performing. She'd been doing it so long she probably didn't even know what was real anymore. Her attorney led her through a carefully choreographed testimony. She spoke about her devotion to her grandchildren. Her concern for my mental state. She feared that Charlotte wasn't receiving adequate care. I never wanted it to come to this, she said, her voice thick with tears. I love my daughter. I love my granddaughter. All I wanted was to make sure that baby was safe. Then Patricia stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Monroe, you testified that your concern for Charlotte's safety prompted you to document conditions in your daughter's home. Is that correct? Yes. And when did you first contact Mr. Dawson regarding a potential custody claim? My mother hesitated. I don't recall exactly. Let me refresh your memory. Patricia pulled up the text messages on the courtroom monitor. According to these messages, you first contacted Mr. Dawson on October 3rd, 3 weeks before Charlotte was born. Is that correct? The color drained from my mother's face. I was concerned even then. I knew the pregnancy was difficult. So you planned to file for custody before you even saw how your daughter handled motherhood? I was preparing. In case. In case what, Mrs. Monroe? In case your daughter struggled? In case you could manufacture enough evidence to support a claim? Patricia's voice was sharp and relentless. You testified that you moved into your daughter's home to help. But these messages suggest otherwise. In this message, dated October 15th, you write to Mr. Dawson, I'll move in after the baby comes. She trusts me. She won't suspect anything. Does that sound like a grandmother who's there to help? My mother's hands were shaking now. The tissue in her grip had been torn to shreds. I was doing what I thought was best. For whom, Mrs. Monroe? For your granddaughter, who by all medical accounts is healthy and thriving. For your daughter, whose trust you systematically betrayed. Or for yourself. I'm her grandmother. I have rights. You have the right to a relationship with your grandchild, yes. But you do not have the right to deceive your own daughter. You do not have the right to manufacture evidence of neglect. And you do not have the right to weaponize a new mother's vulnerability against her. Patricia paused, letting the words land. No further questions. My mother sat frozen in the witness chair. For a moment I thought she might say something. Might apologize, might explain, might offer some glimpse of the mother I'd thought she was. Instead, she looked at me across the courtroom, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't remorse. It was to blame. Even now. Even after everything. She blamed me. I turned away. Judge Chin delivered her ruling an hour later. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented today," she began, her voice measured and calm. "And I've listened carefully to the testimony of both parties. It is clear to me that Mrs. Monroe's petition for custody was not filed in good faith. The evidence suggests a premeditated campaign to undermine her daughter's confidence and manufacture grounds for a custody claim. This is not the behavior of a concerned grandmother. This is the behavior of someone seeking control." She turned to look directly at my mother. "Mrs. Monroe, grandparent rights exist to protect meaningful relationships between grandparents and grandchildren. They do not exist to allow grandparents to circumvent parental authority or exploit vulnerable family members. Your actions in this matter have been manipulative, deceptive, and deeply harmful to your daughter during one of the most challenging periods of her life. I am denying your custody petition in its entirety." I heard my mother make a slight sound, a gasp or maybe a sob. Judge Chin continued. "Furthermore, I am granting Mrs. Williams's request for a protective order. Mrs. Monroe, you are hereby prohibited from contacting your daughter or granddaughter directly for a period of 1 year. Any future contact must be arranged through legal counsel and approved by this court." "Your Honor," my mother's attorney began, "this is not a punishment, Mr. Dawson. It is a protection. Mrs. Williams has demonstrated that she is a competent, loving mother who was targeted by her own parent during a period of extreme vulnerability. She and her daughter deserve the space to heal without further interference." Judge Chin gathered her papers. "This court is adjourned." I don't remember walking out of the courtroom. I don't know the car ride home. I only remember the moment Renee placed Charlotte in my arms, and I held my daughter so tightly she squirmed in protest. "It's over," Marcus said, his arms wrapping around both of us. "It's over, Josie. We won." But winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving. Like crawling out of wreckage and discovering you're still breathing. The weeks that followed were strange and quiet. My mother didn't contact me, she couldn't legally. But I felt her absence like a phantom limb. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call her, then remembering. I'd dream about her sometimes. Not the mother who had betrayed me, but the mother I'd thought she was. The mother who braided my hair and made me soup when I was sick and told me she'd always be there for me. That mother had never existed. Or maybe she had once and something had broken along the way. I didn't know. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. What I did know was this: I was still standing. My daughter was still mine. My marriage was still intact. And slowly, carefully I began to rebuild. I found a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Reyes who specialized in family trauma. I sat in her office once a week and untangled the knots my mother had tied in my mind. The self-doubt, the guilt, the persistent, nagging fear that maybe I wasn't good enough after all. "Your mother taught you that love was conditional," Dr. Reyes said during one of our sessions. "That it had to be earned through performance. But that's not love, Josie. That's control. Real love doesn't keep score." I thought about Charlotte. About the way I loved her. Fiercely, unconditionally, without reservation. I didn't love her because she was well-behaved, impressive, or obedient. I loved her because she existed. Because she was mine. That was the love I'd give her. The love I'd never received. Marcus and I grew closer during those months. We'd been through fire together and we'd come out the other side still holding hands. He was patient with my healing, gentle with my scars. He never made me feel weak for struggling. He never made me feel like a burden. "You're the strongest person I know," he told me one night, Charlotte sleeping between us in her bassinet. "You faced down your own mother to protect our family. That takes a kind of courage most people never have to find." I didn't feel courageous. I felt terrified. "That's what courage is," he said softly. "Being terrified and doing it anyway." Spring came slowly that year. The trees outside our window budded and bloomed, and Charlotte grew from a tiny, fragile newborn into a chubby, laughing infant who grabbed at everything within reach. She said her first word, much to Marcus's delight, and took her first wobbly steps across our living room floor. I was there for all of it. Not my mother. Me. Renee visited often, and we rebuilt our sisterhood on a foundation of honesty. She told me more about her own experiences with Mama. The subtle manipulations, the guilt trips, the constant sense of never being quite good enough. We'd both been shaped by the same hands, bent by the same pressures. But we were learning, together, how to stand straight. Daniel kept his distance at first. caught between loyalty to our mother and horror at what she'd done. But eventually he came around. He called me on Charlotte's first birthday, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen it," he said. "I should have known. None of us knew. She made sure of that. I'm sorry, Josie. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. You're here now. That's what matters." And it was. Family, I was learning, wasn't just about blood. It was about showing up and choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. A year passed. Then Charlotte grew into a toddler with wild curls and her father's gentle eyes. She called me Mama, in a voice that still makes my heart squeeze every time I hear it. She learned to run, to climb, to assert her tiny will with a ferocity that sometimes makes me laugh and sometimes makes me want to hide in the bathroom for 5 minutes of peace. Normal motherhood. Ordinary chaos. The life I almost lost. The protective order expired, but I didn't renew contact with my mother. Neither did she reach out. I heard through Renee that she'd moved to Florida to be closer to a cousin, that she'd joined a new church, and that she told people her daughter had turned against her for reasons she couldn't understand. That's the story she tells herself. The story where she's the victim, where I'm the ungrateful child, where everything she did was motivated by love. Maybe she even believes it. That may be the saddest part of all. I used to wonder if I'd ever forgive her. Suppose there were to come a day when the wound would close completely, when I could think about her without that ache in my chest. Dr. Reyes told me that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen or inviting the person who hurt you back into your life. It just means letting go of the weight and refusing to carry the anger anymore. I'm still working on that. Some days are easier than others. But here's what I know for sure. I am not my mother. I will not love my daughter with conditions attached. I will not manipulate her into being who I want her to be. I will not treat her trust as a tool to be exploited or her vulnerability as a weakness to be documented. I will hold her when she cries, even when I'm exhausted. I will celebrate her victories even when they're small. I will tell her she is enough, not because of what she does but because of who she is. And when she grows up and has children of her own, I will be there to help. Really help. Not to judge. Not to control. Not to build a case against her in her darkest moments. I will be the mother I needed. The grandmother Charlotte deserves. That's my promise. That's my redemption. I'm telling you this story because I know I'm not alone. There are women out there, right now, today, who are living through something similar. Who are trapped in homes with people who claim to love them but are quietly working to destroy them. Who doubt themselves because someone they trusted has spent years teaching them to question. Who thinks they're going crazy because the person hurting them is the same person who's supposed to protect them. If that's you, I want you to hear me. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not a bad daughter, a bad mother, or a bad person. You are being manipulated. And the only way out is through. It will hurt. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. You will grieve the relationship you thought you had, the parent you thought you knew, the childhood you thought was real. That grief is valid. Let yourself feel it. But don't let it stop you. Don't let anyone, not even your own mother, convince you that you don't deserve to protect yourself and your children. Don't let guilt be the chain that keeps you bound to someone who harms you. Don't let love be the weapon that destroys you. You are stronger than you know. I promise you that. I didn't believe it when I was in the thick of it, when I was sleep-deprived and postpartum and convinced that I was failing at everything. I was wrong. I was surviving. I was fighting. And so are you. Marcus asked me once if I regretted letting my mother move in. If I had wished, I'd have trusted my instincts earlier, protected myself sooner, and avoided the whole devastating mess. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. No, I finally said. I don't regret it. He looked surprised. Why not? Because if she hadn't shown me who she really was, I might have spent my whole life trying to earn her approval. I might have let her criticize my parenting, undermine my confidence, teach Charlotte that love is something you have to perform for. I might have passed down the same wounds she gave me. I looked at our daughter playing on the floor with her wooden blocks, building something only she understood. She broke something in me, I said softly. But she also broke me free. So that's my story. The story of a mother who became an enemy. A home that became a trap. A betrayal so deep it changed the shape of who I am. But it's also the story of survival. Of fighting back. I chose my daughter over my mother's approval, even when it cost me everything I thought I knew about family. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm warier now, more careful with my trust. Sometimes I catch myself watching people too closely, looking for signs of the knife behind their smile. But I'm also stronger, clearer, more certain of what I will and won't accept. And when I hold Charlotte at night, when I rock her to sleep and whisper that I love her, that I'll always love her, that nothing she could ever do would change that, I mean it, every word. I mean it in a way my mother never could. Before I go, I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, if the person you trusted most in the world turned against you during your most vulnerable moment, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you forgive? Would you find a way to move forward without losing yourself in the process? I don't know the correct answers. I don't think there are correct answers. Every family is different. Every wound heals differently. But I believe this: we all deserve to be loved without conditions. We all deserve relationships that lift us rather than tear us down. And we all deserve the chance to break free from the cycles that were never ours to carry. If you're carrying something heavy right now, a secret, a betrayal, a grief you can't name, I hope you find the strength to set it down. I hope you find people who will help you carry it until you can. I hope you remember that you are not alone. And if my story helped you feel less alone even for a moment, then telling it was worth everything. Thank you for listening. From my heart to yours, Josie. And that, dear ones, is where our story ends. Not with perfect closure, but with hard-won peace. Not with a mother who apologized, but with a daughter who chose herself anyway. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to love you? How did you find your way through? And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to Voices of Auntie May. Every week we share stories like this one. Stories of betrayal and resilience, of heartbreak and healing, of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength in their darkest moments. Because your story matters and you deserve to be heard. Until next time.